What happens when you realize you're secretly in love with your boss only after he tragically dies? And what if his death was actually a fake to catch a traitor? If you love intense international romantic thrillers, subscribe right now. Let's get straight into how a shadow PA became the queen of an empire. The glass tower of Hongguan Enterprises pierced the Seoul skyline like a silver needle, a monument to corporate perfection. To the public, Kang Jin-woo was the visionary CEO reshaping international logistics. To the global underworld, he was the Gwangju Ghost, a ruthless shadow managing a trillion-won empire of black market ports, maritime smuggling, and quiet, absolute enforcement. Two worlds, divided by a single, bulletproof floor. Amara Diallo didn't know about the basement levels, but she knew about the man. As Jin-woo's personal assistant, she was the gatekeeper to his legitimate life. Standing at 5'10" in her sharp, tailored blazer, her dark skin a stark, beautiful contrast to the monochromatic marble of the executive suite, Amara was the picture of elite competence. She had come to Seoul 5 years ago, surviving the grueling, often insular corporate culture of South Korea through sheer brilliance and an unyielding work ethic. When Jin-woo hired her, the board murmured, but Jin-woo didn't care about tradition. He cared about flawless execution. Amara gave him exactly that. For 3 years, their routine was a synchronized dance. Jin-woo was a man of lethal discipline. He arrived at 6 a.m., expected his barley tea at exactly 45 degrees Celsius, and spoke in low, decisive cadences. Amara managed his global shipping schedules, his high-profile philanthropic galas, and his grueling 16-hour days. She admired him fiercely. She watched him outmaneuver corrupt politicians and hostile corporate takeovers with a calm, terrifying intelligence. Over time, that admiration morphed into something heavier, something she couldn't quite name. It was in the way she anticipated his headaches, placing 2 aspirins by his tea before he could ask. It was the quiet thrill she felt when he gave her a rare, microscopic nod of approval. She told herself it was professional loyalty. It was, in truth, a quiet, consuming love she refused to confess even to herself. She was his shadow in the light, completely barred from his dark. Jin-woo's double life required a terrifying mental tax. In the afternoon, he would sign a multi-million-dollar contract for green energy shipping containers with Amara standing by his side. At midnight, he would sit in a damp shipyard container, sentencing a traitorous lieutenant to the deep sea. But the underworld is a viper's nest. Jin-woo's closest blood brother, Park, cut a deal with a rival syndicate. The ambush happened on a rain-slicked highway leading to Incheon. Rocket-propelled grenades tore through Jin-woo's armored sedan, followed by a hail of automatic gunfire. The news broke at 8:14 a.m. the next morning. Kang Jin-woo, CEO of Hongguan Enterprises, killed in a catastrophic targeted explosion. The Hongguan corporate office didn't stop breathing. It just recalculated. When Amara walked through the glass doors, the air was cold. Executives were already huddled in corners, their voices hushed but frantic. Who takes over the shipping portfolio? Will the stock drop more than 15%? Is their severance protected if the board restructures? Amara stood paralyzed in the center of the bustling floor. The world was spinning, The man who had been her anchor, the man whose absolute determination she worshipped, was gone, reduced to ash on a highway. A sharp, violent sob tore from her throat. The executives glanced at her, their eyes cold, calculating, and slightly uncomfortable. To them, she was just a foreign employee losing her composure. They moved away, returning to their tablets and stock tickers, already erasing Kang Jin-woo from their futures to secure their own careers. Amara retreated to Jin-woo's empty office. She collapsed against his mahogany desk, clutching the dry-cleaned spare suit she had prepared for him just yesterday. The scent of his cedarwood cologne clung to the fabric. She wept, violently, unreservedly, the dam breaking as she finally realized the depth of her unspoken love. Realized too late by the crushing agony of his absence. The memorial service was a hollow, state-of-the-art corporate affair held at an elite Seoul funeral hall. Chrysanthemums lined the walls, paid for by the company's PR department. The attendees bowed mechanically to Jin-woo's portrait. Board members exchanged business cards in the back. Politicians shook hands, whispering about who would fill the power vacuum. Nobody shed a tear. They were vultures circling a fresh corpse. Except Amara. She stood at the back, her eyes bloodshot, her face pale. She didn't care about the corporate reshuffling or her visa status. She was grieving the loss of a great man. What she did not know was that across the street, inside a blacked-out surveillance van, Kang Jin-woo was alive. Faking his death had been his only strategic play to root out Park's entire network without a prolonged, bloody turf war that would destroy the company. He sat in the dark, watching the hidden camera feeds of his own funeral, his face a mask of stone. He expected the corporate apathy. He expected the vultures. What he didn't expect was Amara. He watched her pull a small, neatly folded handkerchief from her pocket, the one she always kept ready for him. He saw her shoulders shake. He watched her approach his portrait, her hands trembling as she touched the frame, whispering a quiet prayer in Yoruba before bowing deeply, a genuine, heartbreaking display of pure grief. For the first time in his brutal life, Jin-woo felt a sharp pang in his chest. She actually cares, not for his money, not for his power, but for him. He pulled up his encrypted tablet, reviewing his private security feeds from the past 3 years. He saw her meticulously tracking his favorite meal times, ordering specific nutrient-rich foods when he was working through the night, ensuring his environment was pristine. She had been guarding his humanity while he was busy being a monster. And then his screen flashed with a red alert. Park's men weren't stupid. In cleaning up Jin-woo's loose ends, they realized Amara had managed his primary schedules. Even if she didn't know about the underworld, she held the keys to his encrypted corporate servers, which contained routing data Park needed to seize the smuggling ports. On the feed, Jin-woo saw 2 of Park's disguised hitmen entering the funeral hall through the basement elevator, moving directly toward the back exit where Amara was leaving. Target identified, a voice crackled through Jin-woo's earpiece, moving to intercept the PA. "Not happening," Jin-woo growled, his voice dropping into a register of pure venom. "Execute extraction protocol, now." Amara walked out into the pouring rain of the funeral home's covered driveway, looking for a taxi. Her mind was numb. Suddenly, a silver executive van tore around the corner, screeching to a halt right in front of her. Before she could scream, the side door slithered open. A tall man in a black tactical jacket and a low-brimmed cap reached out, grabbing her forearm with an iron grip. She pulled back, terrified, but the man tilted his face up just enough for the amber streetlights to catch his eyes. Sharp, cold, indomitable. "CEO Kang?" she gasped, her voice choking on the rain and shock. "Get in if you want to live, Amara," he said. She didn't hesitate. She threw herself into the van. The door slammed shut just as Park's two operatives burst through the glass doors of the funeral home, drawing silenced pistols. Jin-woo's driver slammed on the gas, the van roaring out into the Seoul traffic. Inside the dim, armored interior, Amara stared at him, her breath hitching. He was bruised, his knuckles raw, completely stripped of his pristine corporate facade. He looked like a dangerous animal, yet he was entirely whole. "You're alive," she whispered, a fresh tear escaping her eye. "They said it was a trap." "For them?" Jin-woo said, his eyes fixed on her. He reached out, his gloved hand surprisingly gentle as he handed her a warm thermos of tea exactly 45 degrees Celsius. "I saw you at the hall." Amara looked down at the tea, then back up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. The corporate boundaries that had kept them apart for 3 years were dissolving in the confined space of the speeding van. "You shouldn't have cried for me," Jin-woo said softly, his voice carrying a weight she had never heard before. "I am not a good man, Amara. The things I do, the world I actually run, it is filled with blood." Amara looked at him, her gaze solidifying with the same fierce determination that had made her his top executive. She didn't know what lay ahead, and she didn't care what shadows he hid in. "I didn't cry for a good man, sir," she said, stripping away the corporate title with her eyes. "I cried for you." Jin-woo stared at her for a long moment, the icy walls around his heart fracturing completely. He turned to his driver, his voice snapping back into command mode, but with a new, protective edge. "Change the safe house location to Sector 4. Erase her digital footprint. From tonight, she stays with me." The safe house was a brutalist concrete fortress camouflaged into the craggy, forested slopes of Bukhansan Mountain, high above the neon grid of Seoul. Inside, it was a hyper-modern nerve center, monitors glowing with global shipping grids, biometric security feeds, and encrypted communications. For Amara, the shift was disorienting. The rigid boundaries of Hongwan Enterprises had collapsed. There were no mahogany desks separating them, no corporate protocols to hide behind. She was living in the private sanctuary of a man she had just discovered was a criminal sovereign. Yet their interactions became a tense, highly charged dance of proximity and restraint. Jin-woo no longer wore his bespoke Italian suits. He moved around the safe house in tactical black cargo pants and fitted thermal shirts that revealed the heavy, faded scars of a life lived in the shadows. Amara, stripped of her corporate blazers, wore oversized sweaters lent by Jin-woo's trusted supply runner. The domesticity was intoxicating and dangerous. One evening, while reviewing a logistics manifest, Jin-woo reached across the table to point at a shipping coordinate. His forearm brushed hers warm, solid, and electric. Amara froze, her breath catching in her throat. Jin-woo's eyes flicked to her lips, his fingers lingering on the paper just a fraction of a second too long. The air grew heavy with 3 years of unexpressed longing. Then the weight of reality hit. Jin-woo pulled his hand back smoothly, adjusting his shirt cuff. "The container numbers don't match," he said, his voice dropping an octave, reinstating the professional wall. I will cross-reference them immediately, sir," Amara murmured, stepping back, her heart hammering against her ribs. They were boss and employee, captive and protector, operating on the edge of a precipice. Jin-woo did not survive the underworld by reacting blindly. His strategy to dismantle Park's coup was a multi-phased chess game designed to make the traitors expose themselves entirely before the final strike. Jin-woo bypassed his compromised corporate security entirely. Instead, he activated the discarded network of deep-covered dock workers, retired smugglers, and street-level lookouts in Incheon who owed their lives to him, managed by his fiercely loyal right-hand enforcer, Commander Choi. Choi operated from a moving fish delivery truck, collecting physical encrypted flash drives from informants to avoid any digital tracking by Park's cyber teams. Jin-woo used his global administrative overrides to quietly freeze 3 major shell company bank accounts tied to the Incheon ports. To Park and the board, it looked like a standard bank freeze triggered by the CEO's sudden death. This cut off Park's immediate cash flow, forcing the traders to desperately search for the physical master keys to the Hongguan offshore servers. Jin-woo instructed Choi to plant a rumor among the low-level corporate managers. The late CEO Kang kept a physical ledger of all shadow assets in a private safe box at the Hongguan flagship bank in Gangnam. Jin-woo knew Park would be forced to send his most trusted insider to retrieve it. Despite the brilliance of the trap, Jin-woo hit a wall. Park was staying deep in hiding, refusing to show his face at the bank or sign any digital authorizations. "He's too cautious, Jin-woo muttered one midnight, slamming his hands onto the map table. "He knows I've burned traitors before. He's waiting for the board to officially vote him in as acting CEO in 48 hours. If that vote happens, the legitimate corporate shell protects him legally. And I can't touch him without destroying Hongguan." Amara stood by the coffee machine watching his frustration. Her mind flashed back to the suffocating atmosphere of the funeral hall, the cold whispers of the executives, the smell of the chrysanthemums. "Sir," Amara said, stepping into the light of the monitors, "there is something I heard at the memorial. I didn't think it was relevant to the corporate restructuring, but looking at this map, it might be." Jin-woo turned, his intense gaze locking onto her. "Tell me." "While I was standing near the rear exit before the ambush," Amara explained, her voice steadying, Director Kim of the Treasury Department was speaking with Vice Chairman Yoon. Kim was complaining about his stomach ulcers, saying he had to skip his upcoming trip to Jeju Island. But then Yoon snapped at him, saying, "Keep your mouth shut and pack your bags. The VIP charter at Gimpo Airport is already locked for Thursday at 11 p.m. No paper trails." Jin-woo's eyes narrowed. "Thursday at 11 p.m.? That's tomorrow night, 4 hours before the board vote." "Yes," Amara nodded, moving closer to the screen. "And Director Kim is a coward. He never travels without authorization because he handles the encrypted hardware tokens for the offshore transfers. If he is fleeing to a non-extradition country via a private charter before the vote—" "Isn't fleeing," Jin-woo interrupted, a dark, lethal smile spreading across his face. "He's bringing the physical hardware tokens to Park. Park isn't in Seoul. He's hiding out near the private airfields in Gimpo, waiting for Kim to deliver the absolute access keys so they can drain the company assets the moment the board vote concludes. Jin-woo looked at Amara, his expression a mix of profound respect and something far deeper. She hadn't just been mourning. Her brilliant, analytical mind had retained the exact thread of dialogue he needed to locate his enemy. In an uncharacteristic burst of emotion, Jin-woo stepped forward, his hands coming up to cup her face. "Amara, you just gave me his head on a spike." Amara's breath hitched at the sudden warmth of his hands on her skin. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. The boss-employee boundary dissolved completely under the heavy gaze of two people bound by life, death, and an unspoken devotion. Jin-woo's thumbs gently brushed her cheekbones. The temptation to pull her into him was overwhelming, but Jin-woo, remembering the blood that was about to flow, slowly dropped his hands, stepping back into the shadow of the room. "Get Commander Choi on the secure line," Jin-woo ordered, his voice tight with controlled adrenaline. "We move on Gimpo Airport tomorrow night. And Amara, you stay in the armored van right behind me. I am not leaving you behind again." The rain over Gimpo Airport fell in heavy gray sheets, masking the sound of the blacked-out tactical vans idling near Hangar 12. Inside the command vehicle, the air smelled of ozone and cold sweat. Amara sat on the bench seat, her fingers wrapped tightly around a secure comms tablet. Next to her, Jin-woo adjusted the strap of his carbon fiber ballistic vest. The corporate CEO was entirely gone. In his place stood the calculating sovereign of the underworld. "Stay inside the vehicle, Amara," Jin-woo ordered, his voice low and absolute. He checked the chamber of his suppressed pistol. "The glass is reinforced. If anyone approaches, Choi's rear guard will neutralize them." Amara looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the green glow of the monitors. "Please, just come back into this van." Jin-woo paused, his hand hovering over the door handle. He didn't say a word, but the slight soften of his jawline was a promise. He slipped out into the deluge, vanishing into the dark. Through the van's reinforced windows and the live feed on her tablet, Amara watched the operation unfold with terrifying surgical precision. Director Kim's luxury sedan pulled into the brightly lit hangar. A heavy-set man in a long trench coat stepped out from the shadows near the private jet. It was Park, the traitorous lieutenant. Just as Kim handed over a silver, military-grade briefcase containing the offshore hardware tokens, the hangar's main power grid was severed by Choi's team. The facility plunged into pitch blackness, instantly replaced by the strobing red of emergency backup lights. Before Park's mercenaries could react, Jin-woo's operators breached the side doors. Flashbangs detonated with deafening roars, disorienting the traitors. Jin-woo moved through the smoke like a phantom. The tablet feed showed the thermal heat signatures. Jin-woo dodging a frantic burst of gunfire from Park's bodyguard, stepping into the man's blind spot and disabling him with a swift, brutal strike to the throat. Park panicked, scrambling toward the boarding stairs of the jet. But as he reached the first step, a single, high-caliber round tore through his right knee. He collapsed onto the tarmac, screaming. The red emergency lights illuminated Jin-woo as he walked out of the smoke, his pistol raised. He stood over his former blood brother, his face completely devoid of mercy. "Jin-woo, wait, you're a ghost," Park choked out, clutching his shattered leg. "We can split it. The ports, the corporate shares, everything." "You forgot the first rule of the docks, Park," Jin-woo said, his voice cutting through the sound of the pouring rain outside. "You don't steal from the man who built the harbor." Jin-woo didn't pull the trigger. Instead, Commander Choi stepped forward, securing the briefcase and hauling Park and Director Kim into the back of a transport truck. The coup was dismantled in exactly 11 minutes. No chaos, no public scandal. The Shadow Empire had been defended, and the legitimate corporate assets of Hongguan Enterprises remained untouched. The heavy sliding door of Amara's van flew open, bringing with it the scent of rain, gunpowder, and ozone. Jin-woo stepped inside, soaking wet, his chest heaving slightly as he pulled off his tactical mask. Amara didn't think. She didn't calculate corporate hierarchies, visa statuses, or the boundaries of a personal assistant. The terror that had gripped her for the last 2 hours, the agony of almost losing him a second time, broke like a tidal wave. She threw herself out of the seat and directly into his chest. Jin-woo staggered back half a step from the impact of her body, but his arms instinctively locked around her waist. Amara buried her face into the damp fabric of his vest, her body shaking with a ragged sob. "I thought when the power went out I couldn't see you on the screen," she breathed, her voice thick with raw emotion. "Don't ever do that again, please." Jin-woo stood frozen for a beat, his hands gripping her tightly. The adrenaline of the battle was still coursing through his veins. But as he felt her tears soaking through his shirt, his entire demeanor fractured. He dropped his weapon onto the bench seat, lifted his hands, and cradled the back of her head, burying his face into her hair. "I'm here," he murmured, his voice rough and laced with an emotion he had spent a lifetime suppressing. "Amara, look at me." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. The intensity in his dark eyes was terrifying, but it wasn't the cold gaze of the Gwangju Ghost, it was the burning, uncovered vulnerability of a man who had finally found his anchor. "When I was watching my own funeral from that screen," Jin-woo whispered, his thumbs wiping the rainwater and tears from her dark skin, "I saw 100 people who had spent their lives smiling at me, laughing with me, taking my money, and they felt nothing when I died. Not a single tear." And he stepped closer, closing the last remaining inch of space between them. "But you," he continued, his voice trembling slightly, "you wept for me. You cared about the temperature of my tea, the hours I slept, the man behind the desk. You loved the monster I hid from the world, before you even knew the half of it. I survived tonight because I had to come back to the only real thing I have left." Amara's breath hitched. "Jin-woo." He didn't let her finish. Jin-woo leaned down and captured her lips in a deep, bruising kiss that tasted of rain and relief. It was a collision of 3 years of rigid restraint, of late nights in the corporate tower, of unspoken glances across boardroom tables. Amara wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, her fingers tangling in his wet hair. The intimacy was absolute, a silent, fierce confirmation that they belonged to each other, transcending the boundaries of boss and employee, country and culture. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, both of them breathing heavily in the dim, warm sanctuary of the armored van. "The company belongs to us now," Jin-woo said softly, his hand resting gently against her jaw. "The light side and the dark. I need you by my side, Amara, not behind my desk, next to me." Amara looked into the eyes of the man who ruled the Seoul skyline and its deepest shadows. And for the first time since the explosion on the highway, she smiled. "I've always been right next to you," she said softly, "and I'm not going anywhere." The drive back from Hangar 12 was silent, but it was a silence entirely different from the one that had weighed over them on the way down. The armored van moved smoothly through the fading dawn, the storm finally breaking into a soft, golden mist over the Han River. Inside, Jin-woo's hand never left Amara's. His fingers were laced through hers, his thumb tracing slow, reassuring circles over her knuckles. There was no talk of logistics, no orders shouted over the comms. For the first time in his life, Kang Jin-woo was completely present in the vehicle, tethered to the woman sitting beside him. When they reached the mountain safe house, the atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer a cage or a command bunker. It was a sanctuary. That morning, the rigid corporate choreography dissolved completely. Jin-woo didn't wait at the long table for his tea. Instead, Amara found him in the minimalist kitchen, manually grinding coffee beans, his tactical vest discarded, wearing only a soft black sweater. When she walked in, he paused, his eyes locking onto hers with an unmasked warmth that would have terrified his board of directors. He walked over, slipped his arms around her waist, and pulled her into a quiet, lingering morning kiss. "From today," Jin-woo murmured against her lips, "we don't live in hiding. We prepare the return." A ghost cannot simply walk back into a multi-billion-won conglomerate without causing a systemic shockwave. Jin-woo and Amara spent the next 3 days orchestrating a flawless corporate and underworld resurrection strategy. The public narrative was a masterpiece of corporate espionage fiction. CEO Kang Jin-woo had not died in the explosion. Instead, having survived an initial assassination attempt by corrupt, rogue internal factions, Amara was the architect of the press strategy. She knew exactly how the Korean media operated. She prepared the press kits, coordinated with Hongwan's PR firm, and selected the perfect stage for his return. The annual Global Logistics and Innovation Gala at the Shilla Hotel, an event attended by every major politician, CEO, and journalist in East Asia. The grand ballroom of the Shilla Hotel was an ocean of black tuxedos, silk evening gowns, and glittering crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with tension. The Hongwan board members stood near the stage, sipping champagne, their faces tense as they prepared to announce the company's emergency restructuring plan following the tragic loss of their CEO. Suddenly, the massive double doors of the ballroom swung open. The chatter in the room died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Walking down the center aisle was Kang Jin-woo. He was immaculate, dressed in a bespoke midnight blue tuxedo, his posture commanding, his gaze cutting through the crowd like a razor. But it wasn't just his survival that sent a physical shockwave through the room. It was the woman on his arm. Amara Diallo walked beside him, radiating a breathtaking, regal confidence. She wore a stunning emerald green silk gown that beautifully complemented her dark skin, her hair elegantly styled, her hand resting firmly on Jin-woo's forearm. She wasn't walking 3 steps behind him as his assistant. She was walking perfectly parallel to him as his equal. "CEO Kang," a reporter yelled, breaking protocol as journalists scrambled against the velvet ropes. "Is it true you survived the Insoon explosion? Who is the woman beside you?" Jin-woo stopped before the main stage, facing the wall of cameras. He didn't look at the press. He looked at his board of directors, who were trembling under his gaze. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the state-of-the-art sound system, cold, calm, and utterly dominant. "The rumors of my demise were highly exaggerated," Jin-woo stated, a dangerous smile touching his lips. "They were manufactured by traitors who have already been handed over to the authorities. Hongwan Enterprises remains fully under my control." He paused, then turned slightly, his arm moving to wrap securely around Amara's waist, pulling her flush against his side in front of 1,000 flashing cameras. And she is not my assistant, Jin-woo announced, his voice filled with a fierce, unyielding pride that echoed across the ballroom. This is Amara Diallo. She is the newly appointed Chief Operating Officer of Hongguan Enterprises, and my partner. In every sense of the word. Anyone who deals with this company deals through her. The room erupted into absolute chaos. The workers in the crowd, the administrative staff who had previously ignored Amaris, stared in awe. The sheer power dynamic had shifted in a single breath. Amara looked up at Jin-woo, her heart swelling with an overwhelming happiness. The love they had hidden in the shadows of the corporate tower was now illuminated for the entire world to see. 6 months later, the glass tower of Hongguan Enterprises looked the same from the outside. But inside, the atmosphere had completely transformed. The corporate culture was no longer cold and mechanical. It was revitalized, driven by a new leadership that valued loyalty over sycophancy. The high-stakes strategy had succeeded perfectly. Park's syndicate was entirely dismantled, its assets absorbed into Jin-woo's shadow empire, which Commander Choi now ran with absolute efficiency, leaving Jin-woo more time in the light. In the top-floor executive suite, the mahogany desk had been replaced by a beautiful, circular, modern workspace. There were no longer 2 separate offices. Amara stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass window, looking out over the sprawling, sunset-drenched horizon of Seoul. She held a cup of barley tea. A pair of strong arms wrapped around her from behind, a warm chest pressing against her back as Jin-woo buried his face into the crook of her neck. He breathed her in, his hands resting over hers on the teacup. "The afternoon shipping manifests are cleared," Amara whispered, leaning back into his embrace, a serene smile on her lips. "Let the managers handle it," Jin-woo murmured, turning her around in his arms so he could look into her eyes, eyes that no longer held the grief of the funeral hall, but the deep, radiant glow of fulfillment. "The empire can wait for an hour." He leaned down, kissing her with a gentle, profound tenderness that carried the promise of a lifetime. They had survived the betrayal, survived the flames of a faked death, and crossed the boundaries of continents and cultures. Standing on top of the world, they had conquered together. The Korean sovereign and the Nigerian storyteller had found their ultimate destination, each other. When the shadows fade, only absolute loyalty survives. Did Jin-woo make the right choice by bringing Amara into his world, or did he just put a target on her back? Drop your theories in the comments right now. And if you're rooting for this power couple, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of their empire.